Everyone. My name is Tokwe Shudede, and we're just going to continue the introduction to API testing that we started last week. And one of the things that we'll be doing today is just going through, it's going to be kind of interactive in the sense that if you have questions or if there's anything burning in your mind since we started last week, it would be a good opportunity for you to ask questions, and then we can answer the questions or research and take it forward. So the general rule for today is if you have any question, just indicate in the chat bar. Then I'll stop at different intervals, and then we'll listen to you, and then we'll take it like that. All right, so we spoke about the introduction of API testing and what API testing is. I gave you examples of an ATM machine, which is the client talking to the server in the banking in the banking web services or in the banking backend, and then carrying out various requests. Get request, post request, get request in that you're asking for something, and then post request, you're actually sending, you're actually filling a form, or you're actually sending some data to be able to get a response back. And we talked about API allows communication between two computer components. So in this particular instance, you have your ATM machine, which is the client, and then you have the bank application, backend services, which is your server. So there's a communication between the client and the server. So we said API follows a set of rules to allow communication to occur, and then we give various examples of how we make use of API on a daily basis. So we said API can be written for web-based applications, e-commerce, computer software libraries, database systems, hardware. I gave you an example of, when you, the interaction between a desktop computer and a mouse, where from the click actions on your mouse, you're sending messages to the computer, and then the computer is providing response by whatever is being displayed on the screen. I gave you use cases about, the common use cases when we are searching for hotels, going on holiday. You want to get a list of all the hotels within a particular location, their prices and all that, and then make to be able to give you an informed decision as to which one that you need to pick and go to. We talked about instances like where you have where you're searching for a particular friend on Facebook. So anything that makes you to carry out a request and provides you with a response makes you of an API. Yeah, so that's it. So those are the kind of use cases we talked about. We talked about benefits of API in terms of testing, because when you are testing APIs, there's no user interface. You are dealing with backend resources and all that. So we said, with API, once the logic is designed, even before you have something like a web page, you can start testing the interaction between the backend services, and it's just like a skeleton. You don't need to have the skin, but you can start looking at the back of you can start looking at the skeleton to start interacting, and then doing your testing without having a physical thing to actually look at. So kind of abstract, but it's not really that abstract. And we say ease of maintenance. So when there's a change to your UI with API testing, it doesn't rely on the UI. So when there's a change to the UI, your API is still working as expected. Even if you make if you refurbish your web page, you change the entire design, the logic that makes the web, the logic that makes the web page and the backend server to talk is still the API. So it will still work as expected. Even if you change the color from black to red to green, you add 1,000 buttons, you add widgets and all those things, the logic that still works, it doesn't matter. The API is still it's just a messenger, carries a message from the front end to the back end, and then returns the response and all that. So we also talk about when you have issues with your application with API, there's a mean time to repair is quite high. It's quite high and rapid because they are not making, you don't need any form of you're not talking to any form of UI. You're just looking at the protocol that serves as a communication link between your actual user interface and also the backend. So with API, if there are issues, there's a faster time of the turnaround time to fix issues is quite fast, and which is also valuable for DevOps teams. You want to quickly bring back the services or the application back to, you want to quickly bring it back, put it back live and all that. So it's quite easy to, it's quite fast. API testing provide faster time to resolution than when you have user interfaces and all that. And also the time of testing, with UI, you have to, for those of us that are a bit experience with testing, you look at Selenium, you look at all those things, you gather your elements, even if you are doing manual testing, you go to the screen, you want to see the interaction between the screen and your clicking activities and your workflow and your processes, the workflow from one screen to the other. But with API, you are just, calling a resource, using any of the verbs and then validating your responses back and all that. So by the time you are trying to run 300 tests on the UI, it takes about which might take about 30 hours to run. With API tests, within yesterday, there was for instance, you could make 1,000 requests within 3 minutes. Yesterday, I was trying to run, I did one of the examples of which I can give you is yesterday, I was trying to do an iteration of an API test, maybe just getting a post call. So I did the same requests. I was just running the same request like 1,000 times. And this request, was just like within maybe like 1 minute or 2 minutes, it ran 1,000 times. But if you are running that kind of test using a UI, you might take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, because before the element renders, before the page renders, even if you're running the same test on the same page, before it refreshes, before the element and all the web, all the elements renders in the DOM, it keeps that time will keep adding on and all that. So those are the things that we talked about last week. Yeah, then I gave you this example that, okay, for instance, if you have this website, you would have, you can click on dogs, cats, submit and all that. And, there's this interaction. So once you do all those actions, it talks to the database, it returns your response, maybe provides, okay, the name of the cat is Daniel, blah, 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 all those things. But with the API, you're just hitting, there's no UI. You just send a response, it goes to the database, it provides you, you send your request, it goes to the database, then it provides your response and all that. So then I talked about microservices last week. I explained to you that these days you don't want to pull down your application and say, okay, between 12 and 1 o'clock, my application is going to be down. Why? Because I want to carry out maintenance. But these days, what you have is, okay, the application is going to be down, but it's going to be partially down. You'll still be able to carry out some minimal activities while we are either maintaining our services or we are upgrading our services and all that. So that is what microservices help us to do. Basically, what we do is, it's just like an orange, you split an orange into 4 different parts. So let's say one part is your let's say in this instance, let's say we want one part is your database, one part is your UI, one part is your logic, and one maybe your logic that does computation, computing and all that, and there's one part is something else, maybe that renders something else. So imagine if you want to, like, okay, you want to update your database to the latest version of your database, you still have the other four parts working. While with minimal services, while that other part that that actually, while the database is offline. So and vice versa, you want to work on the UI, or so you can still, so basically microservices just makes your divides your application into smaller chunks, which provide different functions, and then they all work together, communicating together, making use of API to be able to provide you with uh, all the functions that you have. So and then we said microservices are using application programming interfaces. So the connection between the two those microservices is through an API. They talk to each other, they exchange communication through a protocol, and that protocol is the API. So they send data, send and request, request and reply, request and reply, request and reply. So that's how it works. So now, I think one of the other things that we also looked at last week was we looked at, we looked at one of the, so we've spoken about it, we talked about this one, this is your client, your computer here is your client, and this is your server. So the client will request information from the server. The API is this thing that has all these hooks around it. The API is always uh, it always contains the logic. So your server, your clients will have maybe the UI, and the clients will have the UI, the API will have the business logic, and then maybe your server will be your data layer. Your server could also be your computation or logic, or might other be some other computation or logic within your clients that provides information that makes your website work. But this is just like a simple representation of how an API would an API logic is, the logic layer. So we also talked about types of API testing. Yeah, we said about unit testing when you are testing a single endpoint. I think I showed you, which I'll go over it again though. You are making a single request and you are looking for a set of response. So integration is when you have, maybe for instance, you have one, I gave you an example of maybe you have the integration between BBC websites and the weather web services. So if you go onto any BBC website, it shows you that it's 6 degrees or 7 degrees in London at the moment. And then you can also see the weather forecast for a couple of days for different cities and towns and all that. So that's an integration. So they are talking to each other. There's integration between the BBC services and also the web weather services and all that. And to be honest, integration testing can also be end-to-end testing, because you are testing from one extreme to the other extreme. It's just a flow of information between two different API connections. So an end-to-end testing could also be an integration testing. So it just depends on how you see how the logic is being, how the testing is being done at that particular instance. All right, before we continue, I don't know if anyone has got any questions or if you are good to go. I think one of the other things I showed you last week was I showed you this. Is it requires? Yeah, this website. Okay, yeah, 1 second. I'll take your question in a minute. So one of the things that we also went through last week was, we looked at this website. It's just a simple, it's just a simple API, a REST API. So when you click on get, it provides you with a response. provides you with a request, and all that. So what's your question, Izu?
Sorry, can you please go through that types of API testing again, please?
Which one? This other one? This
Yes,
one?
please. Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So what I'll say to you, so what exactly is your question? Because I don't want to spend so much time here. So what exactly is the question?
Yeah, the integration and unit testing.
Okay, so let's say that I have this function, right? List users, right? So the list user function is a function that says, okay, go into my API and return me all my users, right? Yeah. So if I click on this get, yeah, what it does is it returns me all my users with different IDs. So I have a user called Michael. I have another one called Lindsay. I have another one called Tobias, Byron, George, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So that is a unit. Yeah. I am testing a simple unit of code. So this is the API, right? Yeah. So this is the API. I'm carrying out a GET request on this API. And what that API does is it returns me a set of values. Yeah. So that is a unit test. Okay. So do you understand that?
Yes, I get what you mean.
All right. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
now with integration testing, right? So looking at the name integration testing. So I just finished giving you an example. If you go to, let's say if I open, I'm not sure whether BBC, which website can I open that will give me weather, whatever. Let's say BBC weather. My internet is a bit slow. All right, okay, so let's not waste time doing that. So if you look at, I'm trying to open BBC website now, yeah? So if you go to the website, let's say for instance, you go to BBC website, BBC website, if you go to their weather section, right? BBC will try to, what BBC does is BBC talks to a web service, yeah, that exposes the weather web service that exposes weather information for different cities, towns, countries, and all that, right? And when you request a particular town, you're able to retrieve weather information for that particular town. Yeah, so that interaction between BBC, yeah, and that particular town and that particular web services, which returns all the weather for so many places, right, is an integration test. Yeah. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can also see, so from you can also see it from another perspective, right? When you are doing integration test, you're testing a group of, you're testing a group of modules or components together. Do you get? So you can also say,
Yeah.
okay, if you have a, if you go to somebody was talking about ASOS last week, right? ASOS I think is a clothing website, right? She mentioned that if sometimes maybe there's a Facebook icon at the bottom of the page on that website where she can click to and then use her Facebook login to access that particular website. So that's a form of integration testing, right? So what I'll say to you is that all you need to understand is integration testing can be one system with another system, all right? Or one component with another component. And it's also a form of end-to-end testing. I think last week I gave you an example of, you go to google.com, right? You go to Google, Gmail, okay? You want to test your login. You want to test your, you want so that when you put your username and password, you're able to log into your Gmail. When you log into your Gmail, it shows you your email, right? So that's integration testing. So you're testing login and visualizing your email in your email folder. Do you understand that concept? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the integration between the login and your email, whatever. And then if you now pick an email and say delete that email, you want to go into your deleted box, yeah, deleted items box to check that email that you picked from your email your email inbox is your deleted folder. So that testing from login to your email to your deleted items is an integration test, right? And it's also a form of end-to-end testing because you are testing from one extreme, login, to deletion, email deletion. So it's also a form of end-to-end testing. Do you understand that concept now?
Yeah, I get it now. Thank you.
Okay, all right, cool. Yeah, so all right, so in the absence of any other question, I think we just proceed. All right, so let me go back to my slideshow. All right, so I've spoken about web services versus API. So so web services are just in a layman's term, they're just like servers that host different information or logic of that makes websites work, right? Let's just make it simple. So they either hold information or they provide logic. Okay. Now, so for you to be able to access information on the web service, I gave you an example of a weather web service. So let's say a weather web service has a weather web service will have information of all the weather for different places, right? But you need to be able to talk to this you need to be able to talk to this web service to get the information from it and then render it on your web page. You need an API. So web services are so exposing the services of so API expose the content of a web service through a network, and that network is your HTTP or HTTPS. So when you go to the internet, you're able to access information from a web service via the internet. So it only means via this HTTP or HTTPS means via the internet, right? So that is the difference between an API and a web service. So web service is an API wrapped in HTTPS. HTTPS is just the internet. It's just the protocol on the internet. So web services need a network. However, API does not need a network. Don't get entangled with this statements. So web services, so there are different types of web services. So the common ones are the SOAP web service and also the REST web service. So the SOAP one is called is the Simple Object Access Protocol. So in some interviews, they ask you what are the different types of web service. So if you mention SOAP web service and REST web service, no, you're good to go. So SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol, and REST is a representation state transfer. Yeah, and it is mostly so this is a new form of web service implementation. Like most web services now, they use REST calls and all that. So and so if you look at these two, right, SOAP makes use of XML, extensible markup language, right? So it's just so if I Google something quickly, I'll just show you what these terminologies are. I hope, just bear with me 1 second. So okay, I'll show you what an XML looks like later on. All right, and a JSON object. All right, so these are the differences. What I will say to you all is that if you are interested in pursuing testing and API testing, right, you need to be able to. Can you all hear me? Can someone just unmute and say
Yes,
yes?
we can hear you.
Yes,
All right,
yes,
cool.
we can.
That's fine.
Yes,
So
we
if
can.
that's fine, thank you. So I'll just say that you need to understand what the difference is. If I were you, I'll Google what a SOAP is, SOAP request is, and what a REST request is, right? And then I'll try and I will try and understand how to distinguish between the two of them, what the differences are between the two of them. So SOAP is a protocol, while REST is an architectural style. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. Yeah, and the REST stands for Representation State Transfer. So the thing is that SOAP cannot use REST because it's a protocol, but REST can use SOAP. So the thing is that SOAP is a protocol for transferring messages from the web service to a client, But REST can also make use of website SOAP web services. So if you have a SOAP web services, you can use REST API, to access that SOAP web service, because SOAP REST is more like a concept. That is why it's an architectural style. So SOAP uses service interface to expose the business logic. So, everything we'll be talking about in the last 1 week, we'll be talking about exchange of information. That is what an API does. So and all that. So I'll just go quickly. SOAP defines. So to be honest, you need to just Google and understand what SOAP and REST is and what the differences are. To be honest, is not. So one thing that you need to know, one very important thing that you need to understand is that SOAP will only use XML data format only. Yeah, while REST can use any data format, JSON, XML, HTTP, plain text, etc. Yeah. So, and then one thing that you also need to understand is that SOAP is less preferred. So I think SOAP used to be a lot of applications were built, a lot of web services were built using SOAP previously, but because of the flexibility and because of the agnostic nature of REST API, a lot of services are now, a lot of web services are now being used. Sorry, a lot of web services now use REST API. So what I was trying to say is that because API permits different data formats, so most web services are now using REST API rather than SOAP. So before we start going into what is API testing, we need to learn a bit of a few basic things, right? Now, so that I was talking about requests and response and all that. So an API is made up of a set of requests. So a good example of a request is this website, right? Let me just go with. So we're making a request. This is our request. Yeah, we're making this request and we're getting this response. Okay. And then so this is also 1 second. All right, so this is our request. We're making this request, we're getting this response, and then we're getting the body. So 3 things that you need to at least for now, understand is that request. You make a request, you get a response, and then you get a body. Sometimes you get a body, sometimes you might not get a body, but your body can either be full of information or data, or might just be null. Null in the sense that it might be empty or might not contain anything. So, all right. So these are the requests made to an application that retrieve, delete, or manipulate data in an application's database. So a REST request is made up of the following parts. So you have the HTTP verb that describes what action should be taken. Yeah. So I think someone last week was asking about, are we talking, they were talking about, are we going to be talking about get, put, all those things? Those are what they call the verb, HTTP verbs, right? And then you have the URL. So the URL, a lot of us would have been seeing URL. Oh, what's the URL for Facebook? What's the URL for these or for that website and all that? So a URL is called a uniform resource locator that defines the location of a request. So, and then the HTTP headers. So these are information that you provide to the server about to either to carry out an action or to tell the server who you are, to carry out an action. So some servers, like for instance, if you want to, so let's imagine that you want to log into Facebook, but you don't want to log in through the UI, right? You want to log in through the once you log in through the API, you need to provide information in your header to the Facebook API to say, okay, this is who I am, username and password. You provide this in the headers and all that, and or you can provide it in the body. So this they provide further details of the request. This can sometimes be empty, right? So, but we'll come into that. So if you don't get confused, we'll come into that. So is anyone okay? So let me just go to the next slide. So these are the HTTP verbs. These are they call them the CRUD verbs: create, read, update, and delete. So CRUD verbs, right? So CRUD: create, read, update, and delete. Yeah. So a GET request. So we look for the last example that I showed you. A GET request fetches a record from a database. You are getting something, right? Get me a list of users as per our example here. Get me a list of users. You are getting something from the server, from the API, or from the server, right? A post request adds a record to a database, or adds a record to a server. So don't get confused with this database, right? So you might be asking information, getting an information or fetching an information from a server, or a response from a server, or you might be adding an information to a server, or to carry out a particular function, or you might be adding a record to a database. So a post request does that, right? Adding something. So a put request would replace. So for instance, let's say you want to update your password. What you are basically doing is that you are putting something in. Okay, you are replacing your previous password with a new password. So this patch one also is similar to put. So you are replacing part of something with the new information, right? So that's what a patch does. And then delete is you are removing that record from your server or your database or something. So if you are being asked what are the kind of requests that you would carry out on an API, I carry out a GET request, I can carry out a POST request, I can carry out a PUT request, I can carry out a DELETE request. Yeah, so you need to understand. So if they ask you what are your CRUD verbs in an API, it refers to GET, POST, PUT, patch, or DELETE. Those are the things that refers to. So, we talked about examples of what makes an API, right? So this is an API. Yep. And it's also the same thing as what we have on this example. Right. So this is our API. So to be honest, it's basically more like a URL. Like you have like all these URLs. That is the API, right? So in this particular instance, we have this HTTPS /recrees.in, and then it takes this one. So when we go into Postman next week, this is all we will be putting together to create the same thing and get the same response. So I think someone is on mute. If they can please mute, please. All right. So talking about what I've shown you earlier. So this is your protocol. HTTPS is your protocol. The HTTPS makes things visible on the internet. Yeah. And then for that part, in this particular example, this is your server path. So HTTP, anything after your / is your server path. Yeah. And then if you have another / in between, you have your resource part or endpoint. So when you're dealing with APIs, people will be talking about endpoint. What is your endpoint? What's your endpoint? What's your endpoint? So the endpoint normally comes after the server part. You have your endpoint or your resource part. And then if you are now going into advanced requests, you want to, I'll show you, we'll do a bit of this, right? You want to query some things, for instance, I think we did a bit of it last week. Sorry, I have to go back to this particular example I was using for you. So for instance, now, if you want to, if you want to get list of a single user with ID number 2. So a single user with ID number 2. Okay, you see, can you see that? So it says, so if you are carrying out a query, if you are carrying out a query, a query, you use a, like a comma, say, okay, get me the list of users where page is equals to 2. So it returns all the users in page 2. So that is, but if you're still confused, don't get, just understand what the API does, but you know that you have query parameters. So if I were you, I would write this down. I would say, okay, I want to understand it. I know what API means. So what is an endpoint? What is a query parameter? I would just, there are simple things you can just Google and understand online. So because API is quite large, it's quite big. What we are doing here is providing you with the basics. But if you want to really learn more, you need to spend time to, watch this video, pause it, look at some, understand some of the things that we talked about, Google them and do some research on them. Yeah. So I've broken it down to you here, for you here. Your protocol is your HTTP, everything from HTTP to your // The domain is your, maybe this one, like api.money.com is your domain, right? Now the path. So it's just like, okay, let me locate money.com, my company.com, and I want to start seeing products. So your path is like, okay, first of all, I want to go to, let's say, I just want to break it down. Let me use an analogy for you now. Okay, for instance, if you want to come to my house now, right? Okay, this HTTP thing will locate. Okay, this is the house that you are going to. If you now want to start going into, like, okay, the kitchen / the path is, okay, you want to view everything in the kitchen / you're in mrabc.com house / you want to see products in the kitchen. Then you start seeing spoons. You can start, like, you want to get number of spoons, number of plates, number of blah blah blah. I'm just using that as an analogy here, just so that you understand it. And then if you want to look for particular things, you want to query. So that's why it's a query string. You want to ask for particular thing. Okay, you say, okay, get me something which has this value. So you get me, so in this particular instance, right, they say, okay, where get me, okay, so get me London. Let's say it gets me the weather in London. So, but in this one, it says comma and question mark query is equal to London, UK, and you want within London, UK, you want to get a particular weather with this value, right? Uh, so this is just to have an understanding about how this API string or this URL is, they are formed and all that. So yeah, has anyone got a question before I proceed?
Sorry, I've got a quick question. I was just wondering, can you use SQL or NoSQL to query an API?
So SQL is quite different from an API. SQL is you use to query databases, right? And but sometimes you would also have API that queries databases. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So you talked about you said SQL and NoSQL.
Yes.
I hope you understand what the differences are between the SQL and NoSQL.
Yes.
Okay. But what I'm saying to you is that sometimes you might use APIs to query a database. Maybe your information is stored, maybe your server. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, maybe your server is your database. In this particular instance, your server is your database. And you might use an API, you might provide an endpoint or an API to get requests or information from that particular server, which is your database. But API is quite different from SQL. But they can also API can also do the work of, if it has been configured to do the work of to query a database, then API can be used for that particular scenario.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So all right. From everything that we have said, has anyone else got a question, or are we happy to proceed? Sorry. Okay. So the next thing that we want to talk about is so you can have a domain name and a port number. So if you are looking at a particular if you're looking at particular resource that is domiciled within particular port and all that, you can have that information, the host, maybe the domain and the port number. Maybe it is so to give you access to make that request. So I'll show you, you don't get confused, we'll still look at this in more details, right? So the content type. So if you look at this part, what, let me just, I don't want to confuse people, but I think it's best, let me just stop sharing and then share something that will make this a bit, just hold on 1 second. Okay, so I was talking about so don't let, okay, so I was talking about authorization, right? I don't want to confuse. Okay, so this is what I mean. Authorization is sometimes you can use maybe like a token or something, or maybe a token is just like a set of numbers. So look at this one now. It's like this is the value of a token. I don't know whether you can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is, yeah, so this is like a token, the value, it might be 3 letters, might be very long string and all that, but don't bother yourself about it now. But just know that this is what I'm talking about, authorization. So it can be a bearer token, it can be an API key, it can be all these things, all these things, Akamai, AWS, signature, all kind of that. It could be anything, but mostly, and then these are the headers I'm talking about. So you can have a user agent. So if a user agent is just like one of the things that you provide to say who you are, to identify Postman as the application or clients. So you can have, so this accept means you accept anything from any value. That's what it means. The encoding is either a gzip or deflate, or you can Google all those things, to be honest. And then connection, you want to keep the connection alive. So but when we go into Postman, I would go into this in more details, right? And then when we are talking about the body, so if you are making, if for a get request does not have a body, but it can have, a get request normally it has an empty body. But if you are querying some things, you can have some parameters and all that. So we'll get into that. But let's take it one thing at a time. So for instance, if you're making a post request, you can have, for instance, this one is just a basic. I'm just logging into an application, right? And this is the body. So I need to log in my username and password. Yeah. and then, so that is what the body is. So going back to the slide. So the body specifies what information should be added to the database or credentials. So let's say a body will provide, it can either be an information to the database. Sorry that I should actually amend this. We're not talking about, it should be like a server, because the server could be anything. It could be a database, it could be a server that does computation or carries a particular logic and all that. So, well, what you are passing in the body is you are passing information. So that information could even be like, you sometimes from experience, I worked in a place where there was no UI. So when I mean UI, there was no like I'm interacting with the user interface or like a website. There was no website. All we did was we were testing forms that was sent through the API. So I would have, for instance, I might have like a very long list of fill on a particular form. Let's say which form, okay, let's say you want to, I don't know which form is quite large that we can talk about. Okay, let's say that you want to apply to apply for a school for your child. So you know the kind of information they will ask you. Okay, what's the name of the child? How old is the child? What primary school did he go to? Let's say I apply for university and all that. They will ask you so many questions. What did he score when he was in grammar school? What did he score when he was in this? What did he, what was his best subject? Imagine you have like 100 rules of information. And that was just what I was testing, but I was testing it to the API. So I'll have in this particular context, I would have rather than having this email and password, I might have like maybe like 900 or 800 rows of data. So because that's the kind of data that we were passing, we were gathering together and then passing through the API to see, okay, what is the response on this on that particular data and all that. So and we're doing validation. So let's say for instance, I send I want to, let's say when I mean validation, I'm talking about I want to see the response of my API when I don't pass any email or when I pass an empty string, you know, will it accept my will it pass or will it throw errors and all that, or all those kind of things and all that. So so it was I'll show you if time permits, I'll show you just to give you when we start talking about different types of how we test both positive and negative testing on API. So those are the kind of things that you need to have at the back of your mind and all that. So and then we also have so the body can either be an XML format or a JSON or extensible language. So if you look at back on Postman, you have a section here that says, okay, right, are you passing text? So your body can be a text, your body can be JavaScript, your body can be JSON, your body can be HTML, or your body can be XML. Yeah, so those are, so it can be in any format. So, but the format is going to be specific. So that API would ask you, there will be, so it's more like a configuration for the API. So for instance, this particular API makes use of a JSON object as a body, right? Some APIs might make use of text, just normal text. I was checking something before the start of this class. Okay, so this is for those who don't know a JSON. This is a JSON object. So this is a JSON object. You have it's mainly made up of key value pairs and all that, and then you can have different objects. It might be an array, it might be different objects, might be have child elements and all that. So, but that's JSON for you. So this is an example of a JSON object. So you can Google more about it. So this is not really XML, but XML makes use of something they call envelope. But I'll show you next week. I'll show you what an XML looks like next week. So I was talking about, so just as a deviation, right? in this particular request, right? So this particular request has a body, but the body is just like a form element. The body makes use of like a form element, and so it's just a key value pair for the body to so a body, so basically a body can also be a key value pair, just like we have it in the other request here, um which is in JSON object. So this is also a key value pair. This is a key, this is a value, this is a key, this is a value. So, but your API will specify the kind of body parameters that it will accept. So don't get confused. But at this moment, we are still talking about what you can have when you carry out a request using an API. But one thing that you should be aware of is that body requests is usually for put, post, and delete. Yeah. So when you are making a put, post, or patch request, you have a body, you have a body, a request body. And I think, to be honest, and I think sometimes if you are doing a delete as well, you can also, depending on how the API has been configured, you can also have a body as well to say, okay, this is what I want to delete. And then you have some other things like the content type. So the content type is the kind of what the content will be. I think I've showed you. The content might be JSON, might be text, might be XML and all that. Then the application code. So these are the headers you would have. These are your headers. So you see this one has so many headers. So the headers are just like the information that you pass within the body of the API to say, okay, this is what is required. So there might be, so in terms of when you are doing testing, right, there might be, your API might be configured to take some particular headers, which you have to provide here. So sometimes the headers might include authorization, as your authorization. So the authorization that we have here might be part of the header, things that you have to pass in your header and all that. So they're basically just things that you pass in your headers and all that. So even for a GET request as well, you might also, GET requests also have headers. So any kind of API that you carry out, any kind of request that you carry out would have headers. There are things that you pass within your API to be able to perform the request that you want it to give you, right? So that's that, right? So, and before we just round up, let's quickly go through this. So when we are talking about our requests, yeah, we want to get some responses back. Yeah. So one thing that you need to know is that when you get a response back, your response will have a code, right? So for a request that is successful, we'll have a 200. 200 is, so anything that you have two, 4, they're mostly like, like success scenarios. Yeah, success scenario and all that. So like 200 is okay. And the request was successful. 201 is that you created something, the resource has been successfully created. 202 is request has been asynchronously created. And then you have your 400 requests. These are your user errors. So anything that is 400 is a user error, and anything that is 500 is a server error, right? So if you have anything, so as a recap, anything that is 200 is success. That means that your response, something is okay. Anything that is 400 is from your user. When I mean user, it's from you. Is that you are sending a bad request or you are unauthorized. So for instance, if you want to access your account on Facebook, but you want to use the API, right? If you just say, okay, get me my account without passing your username and password, it will say, okay, who are you? You are not authorized, right? Or if you pass in your username and password, if you pass in, let's say you pass in, let's say that your username is supposed to be 5 characters and you're passing 10 characters, you might say, okay, I don't know you. You are sending me a bad request, which is a 400. Or let's say you want to ask for, let's say you want to say, okay, give me particular, let's say you're looking for something that does not exist, right? It will give you a 404, right? And then let's say that you are trying to trying to retrieve information about a city. Yeah. So let's say that you want to, a typical example of a 42, let's say you are trying to query an API that says, okay, give me the location between London and Birmingham. And then, yeah, so that's it. So the API, so let's say the API is an API that gives you location between London and Birmingham, right? And you want to query that API, and you are just not putting any value for any two locations, right? Then you might get, a validation error that says, you know what, it is unprocessable. So 42 is unprocessable entity, 404 is not found, 402 is over a quarter, 401 is unauthorized, 400 is a bad request. So if I were you, I'll just Google it. Then anything from 500 is internal server error. You have 500, 503. I think you have 504 or something as well. So let me see if I can use the internet. 500 error messages, error code. Yeah, I think my Chrome has crashed, and so it's not googling, it's not bringing up any yeah, I think to be honest, I think we've covered a lot today. Let me just allow you guys to go and rest, because it's quite a lot for people that are just coming into I just want to learn about API. Just questions. As a question. Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Have you guys got any questions, or everybody's happy with what we've learned today? Okay, all right, okay.
Please, let me ask one last question. Sorry. So you know this Postman, right? Is it a platform like Visual Studio?
Yeah. It's so it's an ID.
Okay.
So it's a tool. So let's not call it an ID. Let's call it a tool that we use to query API requests, right? But it does, to be honest, it's a powerful tool because it does quite a lot of other things as well. But for the purpose of this course, right, I would say go and find out what Postman does. You will only be using Postman to do some API testing.
Okay. Sorry to cut you.
Is a powerful tool for testing API. Yeah.
Okay, is it an open source tool?
Yeah. So all you need to do, I don't know, I'm having issues with the internet, with my Chrome. My Chrome is not, I think I need to kill it and start it again. If you just Google, it's not gonna work, is it? Okay, let's use Safari then. New private window. Yeah, Safari will work. So what are we trying to do? So it put down, okay, so for everybody, right, go and download Postman. Download Postman.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's free. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to this website, postman.com, and
Okay.
download Postman according to, it's the same thing. If you have Mac, Windows, or anything, it will give you the same UI. Download Postman, read about what Postman does, and then, or if you don't want to download Postman, you can access it on the web. Sign up for free. You can also access it on the web as well. So it's a
Okay.
powerful tool. So let me now show you XML format. I wanted to show you guys the XML format. So let's just do that while we are here. XML format. Examples. XML examples. What am I doing again? All right, so let's see, maybe this one will give us a good example of XML. No. Okay, let's see if this give us. Yes, an XML will have something like this. I call it envelopes, right? It's more. It looks similar to HTML. For those who know, about HTML, but they call these things envelopes, right? So basically, what it does is just information, right? So the information to speak to so we talked about web services, right? So web services, when web services is communicating to a client, right? So the web services, the server now, they pass information in using XML, right? So you can see this one is to 12 journey to from heading. So it's like, you're carrying all your information will be enclosed in all these envelopes. So imagine if you want to say, okay, for instance, give me the weather of London, right? So it might say, okay, maybe location is London, weather, current weather, maybe 5 degrees, dates, maybe also this day, 1st of March, and maybe the location of the specific grid, or maybe a specific code, to say to give authorization to talk to that web service. We will pass the body of the XML. You know what? Hold on. XML. For let's say for airline example. Okay. Don't worry. I know I'll find something next week, and I would show you guys, because it's something that I think I have an example of something I can show you next week. But that's basically what it will look like. It will look like that small stuff. Um, let me see if this one has something. But I hope I haven't confused you guys or anybody, sure. Yeah, you see. Okay, so this is an example of XML. So you see it's people. So this one carries information about first name, gym, age, and all that. So they are usually wrapped within an envelope. That's XML. And then for JSON objects, you have this. So this is JSON, right? JSON objects. Well, this is XML. Okay. All right. Okay. So in the absence of any other question, I think we'll call it a day. But the assignment for you guys is go and download Postman. Go and download Postman. So go to postman.com and download Postman. It's okay. Thanks everybody. Have a good week and speak to you next week. Bye-bye.